Okay. Welcome to financial aid navigation. I'm so excited to talk to you about my favorite thing, financial aid. We're going to talk about how to navigate students through the application as well as parents. We have all of the links and the presentation available for you today, and that way you can navigate the presentation and the links all in one spot. This is a tool that you can use throughout the year. We update it. I update it every about 3 weeks, so you can use this year long. I wanted to start with our training intention. Our training intention is really to allow you to understand where we're coming from when building these presentations. We want everyone to familiarize themselves with financial aid because it is a world that has a different language. There are so many different things with financial aid, including our own lived experiences that impact how we engage and perceive financial aid. And so I really want to make sure that everybody knows when we build these trainings, we do use some humor, but the humor we use is based upon our own experiences and experiences that we've asked students to provide. Like, is it okay if we provide this as an example? And that's with their permission. And so we just want to acknowledge that in this, financially can be it's a very serious topic. I might bring some humor to it, but it's because um, some people think can be kind of a dry topic, and I get very excited about it, but I just want to make sure we also do it in a respectful way. If you want financial aid basics, um, we have this presentation recorded for you. We also have live options too if you would like to watch it live, but we have it recorded. And it's right on our YouTube page. And if you haven't maybe watched it yet and you would like clock hours, it's asynchronous available for clock hours. So today we're going to talk about why financial aid is so important. We have a line by line of the FOSFA. We're going to walk through that WAFSA, which are both of them are open. We're going to talk a little bit about the myths and challenges, and those are kind of peppered throughout, errors and how to fix them, and resources and next steps. So why is financial aid so important? And I know that we all have our reasons, and I encourage you to think about what is your reason why financial aid is so important to you. For me, it's so important because financially gave me the opportunity to earn a family wage doing something I love every single day. And that's what I want for our students. I want them to be able to find what earns them that family wage, and I want them to get there for the cheapest price possible. We also know it's important for the economic viability of Washington, for people to have a post-secondary degree. Doesn't have to be a bachelor's, but some sort of post-secondary degree that allows them the ability to earn a family wage. And in Washington State, our class of 2025 had a 53% completion rate, which is 3% higher than the previous year. And if you're looking at this and you're like, oh my gosh, we worked so hard last year, we're still at like below 60%. I'm here to tell you, and you'll hear me say this a lot, not one person by themselves doing this work is going to increase financial aid. It is all of us working together through collective impact that allows us to make these strides in supporting students with post-secondary access. So if you're beating yourself up, I'm here to tell you that we were also 19th in the nation for year over year change consistently last year. So we are making strides. It just takes time. And it takes all of us working together. And that's why I'm so excited to see that we've got 100 people here today who are excited about learning about financial aid. It's because all of us working together will do this. If you are beating yourself up over this, I encourage you, please reach out to me. We have one-on-one appointments. I am happy to look at resources, supports. Even if you just need an ear, please reach out. It's all of us doing this together, and I want to make sure you have the support. One of my favorite things is to make sure that you have the support you need in order to help your students take their next step to education after high school. Okay, let's go ahead and we're going to do our FAFSA line by line first. So here is the landing page of the application, and you'll notice that one thing that has been added this year is accept an invitation, and we'll talk more about what that looks like. Okay, the FAFSA is available as a paper application and the website, but we know that the paper application takes a little longer to process. So we want to make sure that they do the website if possible, but we do know there are certain student populations that are going to utilize that paper application, specifically like our justice involved youth who may not have access to the website. So I encourage, offering both options is really important, but just know that it takes less time for it to process online. And for example, for right now, and I know some people might be watching this video at a different time, but right now we are currently, it is October 8th, and we are currently in a government shutdown. And so things like paper applications may take even longer. So we really encourage things like the website, which are currently processing. But if you're working with justice involved youth and you need resources to send them, please reach out to me. I have found ways to make our materials adapted to the requirements of correctional high schools, including removing cardstock, staples. I bought a little sewing machine that's industrial that you can sew up the spine of the book so that I can send them out. I take the postcards that are cardstock and I Xerox them onto plain paper. So if you need one of those kits, please reach out to me. I always love sharing them. Okay, so the financial aid application is also available in English and Spanish, and there's support in multiple languages beyond this. So the first step is the FSA ID. And I do want to make sure that people know that they're doing a language change. And that language change means that you're going to see it called a studentaid.gov account. And for that studentaid.gov account, they are going, it's an FSA ID, y'all. They are going to go ahead and they're going to create their account once, just like any other time. Now, students are going to need their email address, but don't let them use their high school email address because they lose access to that after they graduate. And so this is a great time to create email address that they're going to check on a regular basis that won't make an admissions officer blush. And they changed that name for a real important reason. At first, I thought they were changing it so I get some more gray hairs up here. But the reality is they changed it because there are organizations out there, companies, that are telling students, oh my goodness, um, we can help you create your FSA ID for $20. It's free, y'all. You see the serious look on my face because I'm the most frugal woman of Thurston County, maybe Western Washington. They were using the term to scam students. So now that they have changed it to studentaid.gov, it's a slow transition. They are transitioning it over to that so that the website is embedded in the name. So people are going to the right page and not getting scammed. And so for that, I'm like, yes, I can learn a new name for this. Is it going to take me time? Are you going to hear me say FSA ID a couple times? I encourage us all to have grace for that. It's going to take time to change that, but I'm really excited that they're changing it because it does impact students and families. And I had no clue that that was happening in other states. And if you hear of that happening in Washington, please let us know. It's free. It's free to apply, free to create an account. So there are some account creation resources, and Federal Student Aid has created new ones that reflect that studentaid.gov account language. We also have our financial aid advising day lesson plans that include all the tools, everything that's created to just implement these lesson plans. So if you're creating a FAFSA WAFSA account with students, you can use this guide. It has a worksheet that has it in English and Spanish that helps them understand how to create their FSA ID. It has a WAFSA guide and then some additional information that allows them just like some best practices that y'all, so when you share a best practice with me, when you share like something that's working for you, I try to incorporate that into statewide materials to see if it'll help someone else. And so that's why when you all share that feedback with us, I love it because I'm able to help other counselors. And those lesson plans cover every requirement of financial aid advising day. So let's go through the student process for the FAFSA. The first change you're going to see is in the order of operations for the sections of the FAFSA. For 26-27, you'll notice that the contributor invitation section has been moved to the very last portion next to the signature. So we are not having students get stuck if they can't invite a parent, but there's changes to that too that's going to make it even easier. They're going to go ahead and go to the landing page, and they're either going to start or accept an invitation to contribute to their student's application, or they can edit their form here. What I like about the boxes up top is it highlights this current year's the application for the students who are the class of 26, and it reminds them if they need a 25-26 form, they can go ahead and they can access it here as well. So if you're working with a student who's from the class of 25, who's applying right now to go to college maybe for winter quarter, they're going to do the 25-26 and the 26-27 FAFSA or WAFSA for aid. The login page has changed a little bit too. You'll notice that it has the email, phone, or user name that you enter. Then you have to click continue before you're prompted to enter in your password. Previously, it had both on one section. Here's the login page that you'll see. And if a student gets stuck, they have Aiden, that's a little owl, that's their chatbot, which they are working on trying to grow more support for. So right now it'll answer basic questions, but in the future it potentially could answer even harder questions. Then the student's going to go through onboarding videos. Okay, so there are 4 onboarding videos, and I guarantee students probably won't watch all of them, and they may not watch any of them, but they do have to click through them to go through the section. I encourage students to watch them. They only last a couple minutes and explain the process more in depth. The first video really just talks about the introduction to the FAFSA and what to expect while they're filling out the application. It includes also the documents that they're going to need within the sections of the application. The first time that they start the application, they will be presented with these videos, but if they go back into their application or correct their application, they will no longer be presented with these, but they can find the videos on YouTube. The second video really talks about contributors and the process of contributors and how to invite them. The third video talks about what to expect when completing the form, the timeline of how long it takes to complete, and what to do if they need to come back and complete it at a later time. And then the fourth video is the last video, which talks to them about the process after the application is completed. Once they're done with that, they can start the application. Okay, so the 45-day rule, again, today is October 8th, and so currently we are in a government shutdown, and so I do not know if the 45-day rule is being applied at this time, but typically it does when we're not in a shutdown. And what the 45-day rule is, it is the rule that tells students they cannot leave their application that has not been submitted for more than 45 days with inactivity. If a student has more than 45 days of inactivity on their application, the application information will be wiped out. So they'll delete out the data. They'll still have their FSA ID, studentaid.gov account, but they're going to have to restart their application. So we encourage you, if you're doing a financial aid event, federal student aid notifies students at day 7 and day 15. On days like maybe 30 and maybe 40, you might want to have your own communication plan to your students who attended your event to remind them to continue through the application. In order for that application to be considered not inactive, they just have to go in. They can go in and answer a question. They can go in and change something. Once they go in and do something, then it's going to reset that 45 days. Here's the student identity information, and you'll notice a change from last year, and that is that the permanent mailing address cannot be edited on the FAFSA. They're going to have to go into their studentaid.gov account to edit any of the information in the student identity information section. Then the student is asked about their state of legal residence. And so this is going to ask them if they're a Washingtonian and when did they become a resident. And this is how they're assessing for eligibility for state aid. Because when you fill out the FAFSA, you're being considered for federal and state aid at the same time. So I just want to remind people that a parent's citizenship status is not an eligibility requirement. So we want to make sure this is about the student eligibility. So when a student's applying for aid, we are not looking at parents. We are looking at the student's eligibility for aid as they are the person who is applying. So parents' status does not impact a student's ability to apply for aid. And I just want to make that real clear because I think that there were some misconceptions in previous years that maybe mixed status families couldn't apply, and that's not the case. Even for the WAFSA, it is about the student who is applying. And that's why sometimes you'll have years where a parent does a student like an application for a student and they accidentally applying for aid for themselves. We want to make sure the student is the one who's applying and the eligibility is going to be based upon the student's requirements. Okay. The next is consent and approval. The student is going to read through this and provide consent and approval, or they will not be eligible for federal student aid. So they have to provide consent. I know it's like the hardest statement to say that there's like a required consent to receive aid. I don't think those two words should be in a statement together, but they do have to provide consent to have their information transferred over directly from the IRS. Even if the student hasn't filed taxes, they still have to provide consent. This is the whole section, and then it will ask them to either approve or decline. If they decline, then it will say you're not eligible for federal student aid. Then it's going to import the information directly from the IRS. So it'll say, hey, we're loading the information, and it'll either say, yep, we're good to go, or no, we could not retrieve information. If they say that they're good to go, it means it imported and they're going to have to answer a couple questions. If the student filed taxes and it was unable to import, they're going to have to manually enter that information. Then it's going to go to student personal circumstances. So this is going to help students determine, it helps federal student aid determine eligibility. Remember, when a student's applying for financial aid, and this is just for financial aid purposes, y'all, a student's considered dependent until the age of 24 unless they meet special circumstances. And so a dependent student's going to have to provide parent information unless they have a special or unusual circumstance. And independent students will only report their own information. And if they're married, their spouse's information. So there is a dependency override that students can apply for. It's basically saying that they can't access parent information. But I do want to let people know of the limitations of a dependency override. Professional judgments for dependency override are not awarded at a high rate. They really have to have supporting documentation, and it has to be reasons beyond, like if the student demonstrates total financial independence or self-sufficiency, but they're not 24, unless there are other circumstances like abuse or maybe their parents are incarcerated, they would still have to provide parent information. Even if the parents are not willing to provide information on the application, the impact of that is that the student will only be considered for unsubsidized loans. Even if the student doesn't live with their parents, if they're not living with their parents and they're a high school student, they maybe need to be assessed for McKinney-Vento. They might be lacking fixed housing, and that might be another question to ask. But based on these things here, they would not consider a student to be dependent for a professional override. Then it's going to ask the student marital status. Okay, so this is marital. I understand that people might be in loving relationships, but if they are not married, if they haven't put a ring on it and married it before this application, they are going to be picking single, which is really hard for some of them in newly minted relationships. But it is not a dating site, it is an application for financial aid, so they do need to pick the accurate one. I know I had a student who was just like, but if I put single, she'll kill me. And I'm like, but it's okay because financially, it's married. You're not married yet, even if you have plans to be married. Then the students are going to be asked their college or career plans. So it's going to ask the students at the beginning of the 26-27 year, what year will they be? And if they have their first bachelor's degree. Then the students asked if they have any personal circumstances that would apply to them. And on this section here for student personal circumstances, I encourage them to read it slowly. And the reason for that is they may not identify themselves in the question. I've had students who tell me I'm not homeless, I'm houseless. I have a car. And so really the definitions can be challenging on here. And there's another question that we'll ask about homeless status. But students who have been in foster care after the age of 13, even just for a minute, they can be independent for financial aid purposes. If they are in a legal guardianship with someone other than the biological parent, as defined by Washington court, they don't have to provide that parent information. If they were in foster care anytime after the age of 13, or even if they got adopted after the age of 13. If they were in foster care before the age of 13 or adopted before the age of 13, then the adoptive parent will provide the information on the application. But federal student aid does not want grandparents or siblings or anyone else in that. They really are looking for biological parents or adoptive parents that adopted before the age of 13. If the student, again, is in a legal guardianship, I see that question. The legal guardianship means that they would be considered independent. They don't want the legal guardian's information. It's also going to ask if the students experienced homelessness. And so this is where I have students sometimes admit that they are experiencing lacked fixed housing. And so I encourage you to assess those students for McKinney-Vento. McKinney-Vento supports students who are experiencing something. No one should have to experience homelessness, but they're experiencing it as a child, and it provides them with additional supports beyond just being independent for financial aid purposes. And so I encourage them to be assessed for McKinney-Vento. If you do have students who are assessed for McKinney-Vento and are eligible, I also encourage you to make sure they have access to their documents showing that they're part of McKinney-Vento, just in case they get picked for verification. I encourage you to have them have access to them so that they have maybe something digital that they can access after they graduate. So this very plain language question is going to be asked, and then the student can answer. And if they answer yes, it's going to ask, who's determined that you're homeless or at risk of becoming homeless? And so it'll ask if they have a director or designee of an emergency or transitional shelter, or even a homeless youth drop-in center. The high school or district homeless liaison can also provide that and assess them for McKinney-Vento. If you have a Gear Up or TRIO program, like Gear Up specifically has been working with these students for a long time. And so because they've worked with them a long time, they'll know their history. They can also, that director or designee can provide that letter. And then the financial aid administrator at the college can also make that determination. So if nobody has made that determination for the student, but they're like, oh, wait, I think I qualify, then they can select none, and the financial aid administrator will provide that assessment. And then it's going to ask if they have unusual circumstances that prevent them from being able to contact their parents. So the unusual circumstance that prevents them would be things like if if their family is abusive, if they've left the house due to abuse, even if, like, I know I've had students who have told me, and it breaks my heart, they're like, well, I'm not being physically abused. Abuse is abuse. If it puts them at risk to get their parents' information for financial aid purposes, I'm very serious about this. And here's my example of why. Um, Students might think that a federal government asking for information, I had this happen, the student thought that it superseded a local protection order. We want to make sure students, if they're in that situation, that they can answer yes to this question, and they will be assessed as a provisional independent student by the financial aid office for independent status. And so we just want to make sure students are safe first and foremost. And I know that that's not always the case, but I want to make sure that sometimes, we just want to make sure students know that the safety is first. This also includes if the parents are incarcerated and they don't have contact with them, or if they don't know where their parents are. Okay. Then the next is just so you can see what the provisional independent status looks like. It just basically says you can proceed without parent information. You're going to be able to submit this application, but you're going to have somebody talk to you from the financial aid office before they can make a determination. So here's what it looks like for a dependent student for the determination for dependency status. Dependent students will be required to provide parent information. And if they cannot provide parent information because the parent refuses, they will only be considered for unsud loans. And so that means they're getting the loans that are accruing interest immediately. I just highly encourage for students, if the parent's not willing to provide that information, I encourage seeing, like, I've had students use the financial aid calculator at home to show parents what their student would be missing out on. Also, we use the word contributor a lot in financial aid, and parents are contributors. And I've had parents tell me, I can't commit to contributing financially to my child's education. And we want to inform them to make sure that those students and parents know that when you're contributing, it's contributing information, not contributing financially, but they are committing to contributing information so the student can be assessed for funding. And at the end of the session, I'm going to go through all the questions that everyone has. Please put them in the chat and I will make sure that we have answers. And if you are watching this as a recording, there will be a document that is a Q&A from the live training that we will have answers to the questions that are in there. So the next is independent students. Independent students are students who do not have to provide any parent information, and they're just going to answer the rest of the questions. And in honesty, they have about 10 more minutes of application left and they'll be done. So they do not have to answer parent information. And they will no longer even be asked if they want to provide parent information. Then we're going to move to student demographics. So the demographic information is going to be research-based, and the questions are not going to be impacting aid. They're not used for calculations, and they will not be shared with the schools. And the first question on here is going to be the student sex. So it's only binary options at this point and no option to prefer not to answer. They are asking students to select sex at birth, so whatever's on the birth certificate, and we know that in Washington that those could be changed, but I would go off of what's on the birth certificate. I also want to say that and acknowledge that this is challenging for students. This can be we're talking about really private stuff in applications. We're talking about bio families and not chosen families. We're talking about, you know, we're excluding non-binary. And so I just want to acknowledge that when we're doing financial aid events and we're asking questions like this that could be triggering, if you're doing a financial aid event, if you could have an office open for your students so that if they come across something that is triggering, they don't have to process it in front of their peers. When I've done financial aid events, I've had students find out they're undocumented. I had students find out their parents were already divorced. It's very triggering, the questions that are asked. And so I just encourage having that space so they don't have to process because we are potentially using dead names and things like that. So the next question it's going to ask them is about race and ethnicity, and due to feedback, they have expanded this section to have more options. And so that was part of the feedback that they received last year. Then it's going to ask about student citizenship status. So it's going to ask if the student's a U.S. citizen or national, an eligible non-citizen, which would mean they're like from the freely associated states like Marshall Islands, or even have certain refugee or asylee statuses, and then either neither a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. If they pick that third option, it's going to say that they're not eligible for federal student aid and to pursue other forms of aid for education after high school. If they pick eligible non-citizen, it's going to give them a space to enter their A number. And so that's where they're going to enter it on there. And then if they pick U.S. citizen or national, it's going to have them continue on. Okay, so it's going to also ask parent education status. This is going to trigger support like TRIO. It's also going to ask if the parent was killed in the line of duty, and this is going to provide additional funding and support. Then we're going to go into the high school completion status as the beginning of the 26-27 school year. So that's going to include the high school diploma, like a GED or state recognized equivalent, homeschooled, or none of the above. And I did have a question about if they're going to school overseas and they get their high school. So like if they're going to a United States high school that's maybe overseas, like a military high school, they'll pick high school diploma. And then they're going to enter in their high school information. So they're going to ask about what high school did the student graduate from. It has a little thing where they can easily find it. Spoilers, there is no Bassett in Washington State, but during the prototyping, you could pick any city and make it a city. So I have a Bassett Hound, and now we have a Bassett Washington. They're going to go ahead and put their school on there and verify that it is real. All of the schools that are loaded in directly from a database of all the high schools in the United States. They confirm their high school, and then it moves on to their finances. Okay, So it's going to be asking questions about the 2024 income and tax return. It's going to ask if the student filed or will file a tax return for 2024. It's going to ask them their assets. So if they did not file taxes, the IRS is going to transfer in a non-filing status, which means they didn't need to file. And they're going to go ahead and ask them some asset questions. The asset questions, if the student's family is not required to answer them based upon certain criteria, if the student answers them, they will null and void the student's answers and take it out of the calculation if it's not required. And so if you have an AGI less than 60,000, and then there's some other criteria, but also some means tested benefits, which we'll talk about in the parent section, that would allow for asset questions to not be asked. And then the fun part, then they're going to pick out their schools. They can pick up to 20 schools. And the reason for that is we know that students dream big. And so it used to be just 10, now they can put 20. The 20 schools can, they have to be schools that are eligible for federal student aid. It does not mean they have to apply to them first. They can apply for financial aid without applying for admissions. They just need to follow up with an admissions application. They're going to list their schools. And if they have more than 20 schools, this is probably where they want to start narrowing it down. So like, they can't attend all 20. We want them to narrow it down because we want them, especially if they're paying for those admissions applications, but also they can't attend all 20. So it's time to, like, if they don't have a DeLorean or a time turner, they're going to have to narrow it down to at least 20. Okay, and then the student can see the selected colleges. Like they said, they can pick up to 20. In Washington State, we are not first come, first serve for state funding. We are entitlement based. So students do not have to select their, they don't have to select their colleges in order of like what they want to go to, which is nice. They can just put the 20 schools that they're interested in. And then they're going to, this is the part that's changed, y'all. Remember this part at the very beginning last year? This is where all my gray hairs came from, the inviting a parent as a contributor. So it'll have a section here that says who counts as a parent on the financial aid application. And it's going to ask the student, if you're dependent, it's going to ask these questions. It's going to ask if your parents are married. And if they're married and they filed taxes together, only one parent has to create an FSA ID and contribute to the application. If the parents are divorced, and let's say, so the parents are divorced, it's going to be whoever provides the most financial support. And if that parent's remarried, it's that parent and the remarried parent. So it's going to be the step parent and the parent, and that's the household. If both households are contributing the same exact amount to the student every year, then they're going to ask them to determine who has the most assets and income, and that person's going to provide the information. If the parent is widowed, it's the surviving parent. If the parents are divorced but living together, it is both parents, even though you're navigating that situation. And so this parent wizard will help the student determine which parent they should be inviting for their financial aid application. This is the best part, y'all. If you haven't heard about the changes on the 2627 FAFSA, this is the absolute best one. And that is that you can invite the parent just using an email, y'all. It doesn't even have to be the parent's email on file. It can just be an email. What I love about this is we no longer have to enter in the name, birthday, social security number. Everything is exactly listed on their FSA ID like last year. I feel like they also asked like phone number, favorite Pokemon evolved form. I mean, they were just asking wild questions that students didn't have the answers to, and this is where they got stuck the most. But now it's at the end, and if the student doesn't have an email address, they can put their email address in, and they have a code they can just send to the parent via text too. So they can go ahead and click on this link and then just send it to their parent. I love this because it just makes it so much easier. Students were stuck last year. Like, it broke my heart last year. Y'all, I had a student who never got aid last year because of the parent invite challenges. They just gave up. They don't even take calls anymore. And so we know it kept students from pursuing education after high school. And that breaks my heart. when it's a process and it's impacting students negatively. So seeing this change, even though it's a small change, it's a huge change to us. And thank you to everybody who provided that feedback to Federal Student Aid, and that they were able to do this. And if you want to access the Parent Wizard, the link will be in the Padlet where you can walk through, and there's screenshots so that you can do a walkthrough with students. I encourage you, put that Parent Wizard on the computer when you're helping families with financial aid so they can make the determination as a family who the parent is. Because again, it's very private. So this is how the student invites the parent. Then the student's going to read through their application and make sure everything looks good. And they are going to, they haven't signed it yet. So this is the challenge. If they see bikes but not hot air balloons, they are not done with the process yet. They're still getting to the destination. They want to make sure that the contributor information is correct. And if they sent it to the wrong parent, they can update it. They can manage the contributor information and change it. Then they're going to go ahead and go in and they're going to sign their application. And I say this is a real important piece, and that is they have to read through all of this. They have to check the box at the end and click sign. Then it's signed. And once they sign it, they will see hot air balloons. If they see hot air balloons, we're in a good spot. It means that they have either a pending submission, if they're a dependent student, that lets them know that they need to provide contributor information. Or if they're an independent student, it's going to say, congratulations, you are done. You've got this. Your estimated SAI could change, but this is what we've got. And then it's going to give them the submission summary. And so the submission summary will tell them their student aid index. It's going to give them their form answers and next steps. And if they see a red checkbox or a little eye with the blue box on it, next to either of those, they can check to see if maybe they have some incorrect answers that they need to update. They can also go back into their application to add more schools, and they can also remove schools. So that's the student process. I have found we do our financial aid nights where students are just supposed to be creating a studentaid.gov account, but the last couple ones, I have found that students message me and they have finished their application in around 20 minutes. It is wild. They're like, oh, I'm done. And I'm like, oh, with your account creation. And they're like, no, I saw the hot air balloons. And I'm like, so you did the whole application? And they send me something. I'm like, oh my goodness. Because the parents, so in the session, the parents are on the computer next to the student. As soon as they get the invite, they're popping their stuff in. So I had students who were finishing before the end of our event because they had their parent there. But if their parent doesn't complete their portion, they won't have an SAI yet because it hasn't been completed. But it was amazing. I would say about 20 minutes for the student and about the same for the parent to get through, depending on if they had to manually enter in their taxes. It's much quicker this year. So let's talk about the parent process. And I know that people have questions in the chat. Please keep putting in the chat. Sometimes I'm able to answer real quickly while I'm talking, but just want to make sure that I answer all your questions. So put them all in the chat. This is what the parent invitation looks like. So they'll get an email that says, hey, your student has started their application, but they need your help to finish, and that we need your help to make them eligible for aid. The parent can go right here. If they don't go from the email, if they click accept invitation from the email, it's going to import that code in. And if they just have the code that they got like a text message, they can just go right to accept an invitation and enter their code in. They'll go ahead and log in with their username and their password. And if they haven't created an account already, they can just click on create an account. And we know this year, one of the biggest changes is that it no longer takes 1 to 3 days to have your FSA ID, your studentaid.gov account verified. It's auto-verified this year. They're going to enter in that code, or it's automatically entered for them if they came in directly from the email. And that's just going to ask them to say, hey, are you willing to share your information to help your student? Also, is this your human? Are you willing to contribute to their application? Then the parents will also get the same 4 videos, but the parents will probably watch them. The parents will then have identity information to complete. And again, if their information is incorrect in this section, to update it, they're going to have to go out of the application into their own studentaid.gov account and update it in there. But if you update any of the identity information, not the mailing information, but identity information, it will take 1 to 3 days to verify that. So when you create the account, it's an automatic verification as long as they can match it. When you update your account, it still takes 1 to 3 days for that information to match with Social Security to re-verify your account. So I encourage, if the information, let's say a student looks at their Social Security card and is like, my name is misspelled. Listen, we know the miracle of life is really hard to sustain that first year and accidents can happen. I'd encourage them to use the name as listed on the card for the financial aid purposes. And then as soon as it's updated with Social Security, then they can go ahead and update it in the system. This is where the parent is going to provide consent and approval. They have to provide consent and approval for them to be eligible for aid. Then it's going to import that IRS data. The parent's going to be asked questions about demographics, their marital status, their state of residence, and then income information. So for parent demographics, it's going to ask questions about the family to determine their eligibility. It's going to ask the parent's current marital status. It'll ask the parent's legal state of residence. And then it's going to go right to financials. If the form imported the information, they will not have to enter in tax information. They'll have some questions, but nothing that's coming directly off the taxes. Whereas manual entry, they'll ask what form they've completed, and they will be able to see line by line what they need to enter. So federal benefits received, this does not impact their eligibility for aid, but it does impact potentially if they have to answer asset questions. And because they are in a means tested based program, they could be eligible then for Max Pell. And so some of these programs you'll see when it says free or reduced price lunch, it means not that are you a recipient of free or reduced price lunch, but are you eligible for free or reduced price lunch? And that is one of the things that they have tried to clarify. But we do know we have 100% free or reduced price lunch schools, and whoever wrote that question may not have known that. And so the way it says it, we want to make sure they're eligible versus receiving. Then it's going to ask the parent's tax filing status and if they filed with their current spouse, if applicable. It's going to show the family size as pulled directly from the taxes from 2024. Now, we know the miracle of life could have happened in this time, so we want to make sure if more people, humans, have entered the household, I have to say humans because I had a student list their cats as dependents one time. But if they have humans that they are taking care of, they're providing more than half their support of, they will go ahead and add those extra humans on there. It's going to ask the number of people in the household who are attending college. This does not impact anything. It's not using the SAI calculation anymore, so it doesn't mean they're going to receive more aid, but they are still asking that question. Then for the parent tax return, if it did not import, this is what it's going to look like. So it's going to ask the filing status, and then it's going to tell them, depending on the form, it will tell them what lines to use. So last year it didn't have that information. A lot of us had to become tax experts last year. Like we were having to figure out line 47 minus this plus Schedule A. We don't have to do that anymore. All the calculations are on the form. And again, for the family size piece, just to remind you, the family size piece is because they are looking at the taxes. So they're importing the number of people that are in that household from the taxes from the form right into the application. But it's information from 2024 and it's asking you about your current household size. So you might have to adjust that number if more people have entered your household. It's also going to ask them if they have child support that they've received, parent asset information. This may not be asked. And so this might not be asked if they did not qualify to report assets. But if they are asked, it's going to ask about their total cash checking and savings account. It's going to ask about their net worth of investments, including real estate. And that means investment real estate. So we're not talking about the house they live in, but if they've got some spare houses hanging out, they're going to report those. And then this is a change this year that's going to benefit our families, and that is current net worth of business and farms that have over 100 employees. So we've returned that criteria back, that it's the over 100 employees versus the last year we had to evaluate every small business. So I'm here to tell you that you might have students from the class of 25 that were impacted by that decision, um, who might be like, oh, we're not going to get aid because my previous student didn't get aid. I encourage those students to apply for aid this year because they might be eligible now that they are not valuating that small business or farm. And so I encourage, this is the one piece I'm really excited about too. I encourage you, as students navigate it, we no longer have to evaluate those businesses unless they have more than 100 employees. Then it's going to ask the parent to give information on their spouse if applicable. And it's just going to ask their date of birth. Um, and they will ask them to invite them through an email as well if they are inviting that spouse. Then the parent's going to sign again. Bikes mean we're almost there. Hot air balloons mean we're done. So they're going to read through all their information. They're going to check that they're signing it and click sign. And then we see the beloved hot air balloons, which means that that application is complete. What happens is once the parent submits their portion, it informs the student, hey, your contributor finished their section. And if there's no one else contributing to the application, it is complete. And it tells them your application is complete. Don't forget to follow up with admissions applications. And that's the FAFSA. We're going to go into the WAFSA next. Please keep your questions coming in the chat. And again, if you are watching this as a recording, there will be a document in that little Google Doc that has all of the Q&As available for you. So you can see all the questions that other people had. And I'll tell you, most people will have the same questions. So let's go into the WAFSA. Okay, for the WAFSA, I always encourage, like the WAFSA, and same with the FOSFA, we are not here to prepare applications for people. We do not want to be preparers. We are here to support those with their application, and but not to prepare. If you prepare an application, what ends up happening is there's no paid preparers anymore. That's not a thing anymore. You can open yourself up to legal, like, issues if you prepare for other people. And so I encourage you, we're here to support. Also, if you prepare it for a student, you've robbed them the chance of doing it themselves, and you may not be available next year to do that. And so that support is important, but not the actual preparation. Be mindful of sensitive information. We're assessing with the WAFSA just state aid, financial aid eligibility. And so this is not considering anybody for federal aid. This is just Washingtonians saying, I'd like some of that Washington state aid, and I'm not eligible for federal aid, or I'm choosing not to apply. We have WAFSA guides that are available in English and Spanish for the 26-27 and the 25-26 applications. And we also have support at WAFSA at wasac.wa.gov. And you can call 888-535-0747. And if you select option 2, there's support there too. So first is residency that we talk about. For residency, we just want to make sure that people know that residency in Washington for financially and for college purposes means that you have maintained a domicile in Washington State for 12 months consecutively for purposes other than college. And so that means pretty much if you've survived one, like rainy, smoky, sunny, like as we have right now, rainy again, maybe snowy if we're lucky on the west side, then you're one of us. You're a Washingtonian. If you survive all this, you survive the moss, I want you to get rid of your umbrella. I want you to get a jacket with a hood, and I want you to apply for state aid. Not everyone who lives in Washington is maintaining a domicile. So there are certain visa statuses like work visas where you're unable to maintain a domicile in the United States to start to establish residency. And so there are certain students that may not be able, like exchange students who may not be able to establish that residency for state aid. And we have these flyers in multiple languages that you can share with students to help them understand, because the other thing I hear from families too is they think that financial aid is only for students getting out of high school. and it's for anybody who is eligible. And so I am finding this year specifically, I have more students who are like, oh, my parents want this information. And I thought it was just because it's so they could support their student, but it's because the parents are going back to college too. So for our financial aid advance, I always say, I don't care if you're the class of 1926 or 2026. I just care that you need help with financial aid, that you want to know more, that you want to know more about what's available to you, because that's what we're here to do, to inform you so you can make an informed decision. So for financial aid for undocumented students and other select applicants, we want to make sure that for the WAFSA, it's not just because someone's ineligible for federal aid. It also could be because maybe the student's parents are undocumented and they're making a family choice of deciding not to file for federal aid for personal circumstances. They've decided not to pursue federal aid. They do not want to provide information to the federal government. Um, that maybe I've had some students, this is a big one, that have had federal loan default who are finishing up a program in Washington State who've been able to use Washington State aid, or they're in repayments on a federal grant. Is another big one. This year, I've really found it's more of families making personal decisions on whether they want to complete the FAFSA or WAFSA. I encourage, if you are having an event, put every computer on the WAFSA eligibility tool. This is going to ask them a couple questions and determine if they're eligible for the FAFSA or WAFSA. We never want to ask questions about status. We want students to assess themselves, but it also has information on there about applying for state aid alone without applying for federal aid if you are unwilling to pursue federal aid or have a personal feeling that they want to pursue aid. Okay, so here's the 2627 WAFSA. Again, the WAFSA is free, FAFSA is free. These are applications for student to apply for money. If someone is charging them money, there's so many people, like we've got about 100 people in this room alone who are learning more about financial aid to help students. No one should be charging to support with a free application. There's so many people willing to help. But I do know there are companies out there charging specifically Spanish-speaking families upwards of $800 to help them apply for financial aid. And I just want to make sure that students know that it is free to apply and there's lots of people here to support them. And so I encourage, if you have companies that are charging students, it's free. Join us one of our events. We have a statewide calendar. We're happy to help. And we will do it for the low, low price of free 99. Okay, here are the questions for the eligibility questionnaire that you can put on your computer at school that helps them determine if they are completing like the FAFSA or the WAFSA. And then from there, so once they have the questionnaire, it's going to ask them if they've completed a federal app. It asks if they've completed a FAFSA, and the reason for that is students are amazing and they're super frugal. I love it. But they're like, if I apply using the FAFSA, I'll get double the money if I do the WAFSA. And that is not the case. You do one or the other, never both. So the student can choose which application they want to pursue, either through eligibility or through personal choice. And then it's going to ask about if they meet any of the qualifications that, even though they are eligible for federal aid, that they're only pursuing state aid. Then they're going to create an account just like anybody else. They're going to create an account. If you have a student who's not eligible for federal or state aid, you might have students who haven't been in the beautiful state of Washington for 12 months. Don't worry. There is also Immigrants Rising has an amazing scholarship list. These are scholarships every year that are updated. I haven't updated the slide, but they are updated in there. There's about, if you print them, about 42 pages of scholarships that have no citizenship requirement at all. And in this list here, y'all, there are graduate scholarships, which are like the unicorn of the scholarship world. So on the WAFSA, they did add a question this year, and this was to since I always try to show when y'all give us feedback and we change something, I always want you to know that we changed it. So this was feedback from y'all about like, what if a student does not want to provide that information and we ask if they're eligible for federal aid and it's really confusing. So they added this on here. If you're uncomfortable, you can, with submitting a FAFSA, you can use the WAFSA and just select no, and it'll move you on to the next page. Okay, now it's going to have them register for an account by creating an email, confirming that email, and creating a password. The parents are going to create an account later on through an invitation from the student, so they don't have to do anything right now. Then the student's going to receive an email that's like, hey, validate your email. Let's create you an account. They're going to go ahead and enter in their information. And then as soon as they've entered in their information, it's going to allow them to select documents, and it's going to allow them to select the new application for financial aid as well as this current year's application for aid. So this one will be bumped right to the top because it was just released last week. And then they're going to see that it's not been started. They're just going to click on it to edit, start, or complete a form. So they go ahead and just click there. On this page, you're going to see that the application's in progress. They can click exit, and then if they need to, maybe they can't finish that day. And then they'll just click next through the sections. You'll see on here that there is a bar on the right that has all the different sections of the application. And on the bottom of the page, you're going to see the number of pages within that section. So students have an idea of where they are in the process, just in case they don't have enough time to finish the application that day. So on here, you'll see student contact information. They're going to, and right now it's only in English and Spanish, but I encourage you, provide that feedback to our agency to see if we can provide it in other languages. And I encourage you, if you're looking to see if it's provided in other languages, list the languages you're looking for, because I am finding that like looking at census data is not providing me with accurate populations for language support. And if you want to provide that feedback, I am happy to I'll put a link in that Google Doc when we're done here today. And I thank you in advance. I just want to make sure if there's anything we can do to better support, let us know. Okay, so the students are going to go ahead and they're going to enter in their basic information, including their email address. Again, an email address that's not their high school email address, an email address that they're going to check on a regular basis that won't make an admissions officer blush. And they're also going to enter in their mailing address. If a student does not have a mailing address, there are a couple options. I know some of the high schools have allowed students to receive mail there. I know some of the libraries have allowed students to receive mail at the libraries. I also know that you can use any post office and have it sent general delivery to that post office. And I've had students use the post office address as their mailing address as well. And so there are options for students who are unhoused to be able to put in an address if needed. Then it's going to ask personal circumstances. These are the same questions as the FAFSA. So it's going to ask, this is where it's going to ask about if they were in foster care, if they're emancipated, if they were at any time after the age of 13 adopted or in foster care or ward of the court. So they'll read through this slowly and then answer it. This is where it's going to tell them again that if they have unusual circumstances, this is where they're going to note it, but it does list also like what those circumstances are. And I like that it elaborates a little bit more on them. And so I also like that it adds like information on there for the student to, like, if they don't have safe and stable housing, that there are programs that can help. Okay, then it's going to go ahead and ask for state of residence and the year and month in which that occurred. Then it's going to go to the student financial information. So you're going to see that this is an all-in-one application. There's no like parent portal. The parent's going to provide information on this application with the student in a couple sections. But right now, it's just going to ask about the student's tax filing status, and it's going to ask about student assets. For the tax filing status, it will be for the 2024 year, and it's going to tell them which line off the taxes to use. And that's because the IRS and Washington State does not have a data sharing agreement to have that information imported. And I don't believe that's really in the works at all. So they're going to have to manually enter that information. Then it's going to have the school list. And on the WAFSA, you can pick up to 20 schools, just like the FAFSA, except for they have to be Washington State schools because it's Washington State aid. So they're going to go ahead and pick the school that they want to go to, and they don't have to enter codes. They just have to use drop-down boxes. I love that about this. So there's over 60 schools they can choose from. Then they're going to have the parent enter in parent information. So this is where the parent's going to enter in their first name, middle name, and last name. And if applicable, their social security number, their ITIN, which is the individual taxpayer identification number. You'll hear that word used frequently, or a DACA number, which is the deferred action for childhood arrivals. They'll enter that in there. Then they're going to go ahead and enter in their personal information, which includes their marital status, state of residence, and they're going to go ahead and ask them the family size. Then, just like any other thing, it's going to ask about federal benefits received. So this may or may not be applicable. And then it's going to ask about parent tax information. So this is where it's going to ask again. Oh, this is just to clarify that the parents, so if they have foreign income, they're going to convert it to US dollars. And the exchange rate is published at the Federal Reserve, and there's lots of calculators online that make it real easy to transfer to United States dollars. The challenge is I've had families who've gone in and entered in the numbers, but based upon the currency in the country that they reside in. And so it has skewed their ability to be eligible for aid. Then it's going to talk about residency information, and it basically adds in the Washington Higher Education residency affidavit into the WAFSA. So it's just basically certifying that they've met the requirements, that they've been in Washington for a year. And then here's that a little blown up so that you don't have to read the tiniest font ever, but you can also see it right on our website. Then they're going to sign. So they have their signature options are going to be digital. And you can also, there's a potential where you can do a wet signature too. But I always use that as a last resort because mailing stuff can get expensive, and I don't want to make any assumptions on families having to mail stuff. I just found that it can be challenging for access. And so for accessibility, the online one's a little bit easier. Then they're going to go ahead and they have to download their form and they have to actually look at it. So they can't just download and just let it do nothing. They have to look at it and then click that the information is correct. So this is a great way to look and double check. Did I answer anything right? Is it, wrong? Does it look right? It's just in a different format than them answering every question by question. So sometimes it's easier to catch an error that way, and they can fix any errors. Then they're going to sign. The student's going to sign their application by putting in their name as listed in the application and their password. So here is the almost complete application for a dependent student. If they were independent at this point, their application would be completed. But since the student is dependent, they're going to have to get a parent signature for the information that they provided. And so they're going to go ahead and click on review and update and request parent signature. To request the parent signature, they want to make sure that they go in and they invite the parent using the email address that they have on file. So they go ahead and put the email address they have on file. They pick the parent to choose for the application of who's going to. It's the email address that they put in the application as they were going through. So that's the same email address for that parent that they're going to want to put in there. They have 72 hours from when the link is sent to the parent before it expires and the student has to send another one. This will take the parent to the parent portal, basically, like to create their account. The parent's going to put in their email address there, and then they're going to create a password. And again, it's going to tell them, hey, awesome, you go into your email, take a look and verify that that's you. They're going to verify, and it's going to take them over to enter in the information on the account. The birthday and then last four of the ITIN or social security number, if applicable, have to match exactly as what the student put on their application. So they have to make sure they match it. Then the parent's going to go ahead and read about the signature requirements, and they're going to sign the form. They go through, they enter their password. It'll have the minimum electronic signature and hardware requirements. I found that most products work well. Like I feel like even the Chromebooks are working fine for this process. Okay, once the student's done with the WAFSA, the application within 24 hours, the information is going to be sent to the schools that they've listed on their application. So those 20 schools that they listed are up to 20. They're going to use the financial aid offices are going to use that information to start to put together an award letter. And so the award letter, also known as a financial aid offer, is what they provide to students in order to show them what they are going to receive potentially in in-state, out-of-state, institutional, and loans. The other piece here that I find, so that award letter is going to take a while to get to them. And I just want to make it realistic. I know that students will submit their application and the next day they'll be like, do I have an offer yet? Some schools, they won't see it until, like for the community colleges, maybe not even June. Some schools it'll be May, some schools it's March. So I encourage them to ask their school when award letters are released. But then once they know that it's not going to come out till March, they don't have to worry about contacting them until then unless they get picked for verification, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And so that's the WAFSA. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat. There is a WAFSA application guide that you can go through, and there are also paper applications to walk through the questions. Next, we have financial aid appeals, and I just wanted to talk about this. I added this back in because this year I have gotten a lot of requests for appeal information, and so it has been it's been a challenging economy for people. And so you may see more requests from families or even misconceptions that families have that they have to wait until the tax year that we are using matches like what they're making now, and that's not the case. So for appeals, we're finding that families have experienced recent financial changes. Um, in order to ask for an appeal, so families can say, hey, especially if there has been a decrease in income. So if someone's been laid off, if someone even has like a WARN notice or has been furloughed, and we know that it's going to be a long furlough, if there have been negative impacts to the family's ability to pay, I encourage them to apply for financial aid just like anyone else. And then I encourage them to do an appeal. And so the appeal would say basically, this is how much my family made, but this is actually how much we're making now and the ability to pay. And to do this, I encourage checking the school to the process, but there is a tool called Swift Student that what it does is it asks questions in very plain language, super plain language, but then it creates a template of a letter to send to financial aid that's all in financial aid language. And so it can be for any of these requirements here, but the one that you're thinking probably of would either be to exclude income information or it does not capture a financial difficulty I'm currently facing. Um, you can also use this one. I've had students use it when they've missed a deadline or even for emergency funds. This tool is free to use. They don't share the information with third parties. It's created by FormSwift, and they created it during the pandemic to help students navigate the appeal process when a lot of people were laid off. So it kind of looks like this. They're going to go ahead and they enter in all of the information in the left-hand column. They're allowed to pick if it's an unusual circumstance. They're able to pick what type of supporting documentation they're including. I also love the follow-up sheet that they can print that tells them, so they're able to tell the financial aid office, I prefer to be contacted this way. And then there's a little log that they can go ahead and enter if they talk to financial aid. I talked to this department on this day, so they can remember, oh yeah, I already called them and I talked to this person. And then that way they can kind of monitor the process for their appeal. Now, I find that, of course, there's going to be people who are like, man, I lost $20 out of my wallet at like an appeal. And they will not appeal a small, like it's going to have to be something like job loss or significant income loss for them to do the appeal. And so I just want to make sure there are limitations on the appeals, but this is the easiest way to do it. And I bring that information up because I've had several parents this year who have asked me, like, is this something that I can do? And then when I've talked to the room of families and just had given the information freely, the number of people I see write it down tells me that there are people who are experiencing this in larger numbers than we might see, who might not know that this is available to them. It also means that during our financial aid events, we might have parents in worker retraining who are trying to get retrained into different fields. And I encourage you to provide them the same support that you provide your students with the financial aid application. Remind them that students and parents can apply for aid, and that doesn't negatively impact your household. I said that because one of the parents said, if I apply for aid, they'll take it from my kid. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. But they were so scared of that. And as soon as I said that, by the time we were done with the session, they'd already applied for aid. Let's talk about some common errors and how to fix them. So the biggest ones are going to be legal information from the student's application, specifically like name and social security number. So for the FAFSA, making sure that you are entering in that they're entering it as exactly listed on their social security card, if applicable. If their name is longer than the characters provided to them, they're going to fit as much of that beautiful name in there, and that's okay because it's going to match the number, the characters that are able to be matched, and so they'll just put in as much of their name that fits as exactly listed on their card. If they have gone through a recent name change, and they've put the information in, like especially for their studentaid.gov account, they put their information in, but it's not matching. If it's a very recent name change, they might have to call Federal Student Aid's call center to ask them to pull their file manually to review the updated file from Social Security over to FSA. And so that is a little bit longer of a conversation. I encourage if it's not showing, like maybe they've received it but hasn't updated, they could try using the old information to see if it still matches. And then as soon as it's updated in the system, they can update it. Incorrect financial aid year. You will have students every year who will apply for financial aid for the year that they're in high school. So you will always have someone accidentally from class of 26 apply for the 25-26 financial aid because they're like, oh, that's this year. But that's this year that students are going to school. They're in high school right now. And then again, unless they have a time turner, they're not, going to be doing both and getting financial aid for it because they haven't graduated yet. They want to put the year that they're going to college. So if you have a student that completes the 25-26 FAFSA or WAFSA, and they're like, oh, I did the wrong one. It's okay. You're going to tell them you just did the practice FAFSA or WAFSA. You learned how to do an initial submission, and now you're going to learn how to do a renewal, which means you're ahead of the game for your students who are, the peers who are going to have to do that next year. They're already going to know how to do it. So it might be a mistake that they made, but it was a learning opportunity. And then using the incorrect parent for the dependent students. So not providing information on the correct parent can impact the student. So we want to make sure that it's the parent that that provides them with the most financial support. They no longer look at where they're living. They don't look at who's providing it. Like they're not looking at taxes. They're looking at who provides the most financial support. And then not submitting the application. Again, if they're on bikes but not on hot air balloons, they are not done yet. And that was a big one last year. Oh my goodness, I had quite a few that sat there and again, what happens after 45 days of an activity? The application's wiped. So they could be all the way to the end, but still not submitted. So we just want to make sure, and they'll get a student aid report. Like they will have a report they received. So if they haven't received that, they can go back in and check, did I submit it? Okay, let's talk about resources and next steps. So we've talked about the FAFSA and the WAFSA. We've walked through both and what to expect and some challenges and ways to support your students. But let's talk about your resources to help you. The first is your Padlet. And these are all going to be on that Google Doc that I shared with you. The Padlet has everything for practitioners. So if you're on the orange Padlet, it has everything. Financial aid updates, this week in financial aid. This is where I put training information. I put translated resources from other states even. I encourage on here, like if there's a resource that you're missing, that you're trying to create, if you're creating a resource and you can't find it, let us know to see if we have it. And then please continue to put your questions in the chat. I promise you, as soon as I'm done with the next couple resource slides and next steps, we will go through Q&A. I'll answer all your questions. And if you stump me, I'm just as curious as you, but we'll find out and I'll get your email address. Okay, here's the prototype. If you want to play around in the FAFSA for 2627 and not break it or have to do your own, use the prototype. The prototype just walks you through. You can be a student who's current, a returning student, a student who started their application but has errors. You can be a parent. It has everything in there that you can kind of play around in. There are some limitations on the prototype when it comes to like you can't, it's not in Spanish, unfortunately. Um, but it does give you a good walkthrough of the application. And this is where most of our slides came from. The slides in Spanish, because this is not available in Spanish, come from my own application. The slides in English come from this tool. 12th Year Campaign. We are here to support you. The 12th Year Campaign is Yasleen and myself. I am so excited to do this work with you all. It is one of my favorite things. I am so grateful for the practitioner community and how you have folded me into the work that you do. It is one of my favorite things to do this work with you all and support students. And so if there's anything that we can do to help support you, we have free trainings like this one, printed and digital resources. We have online completion events. We also have one-on-ones to help you. If you're like brand new and you're like, I don't know how to do this financial aid event, don't worry. We're going to sit down. I wish we could sit down in person because I'd have chocolate for you. But until I can like find digital chocolate, you will at least have me providing resource supports and helping you navigate, learning about different people who are doing the work in your area and maybe different partners for the work too. And for that prototype, there is a code. It is, I think it's just prototype 2627, but I will make sure that it is included in that Google Doc. And once the presentation's over, I'm going to take this recording. So if you're listening to this recording, it's already posted. You're in the past. But it, if once it's all done, I promise you, I will send you all of this information. You'll get the recording and the presentation on all of the resources. Thank you, Bree, for putting that in the chat. Oh, and then this is just Yasleen and myself. We're your smallish but mighty team of two across Washington supporting you with this work. I say smallish because it used to just be me, so I'm so grateful for Yasleen. Then we have our Washington Financial Aid education and training videos. So these are videos you can show in your classroom or even send to students. Students are amazing. They love a compliment sandwich. So when they saw my old videos, they were like, Christina, we love that you love financial aid. Your videos are long, girl. Okay. Next time, could you make something that's like maybe a cartoon, or could you teach your Basset Hound how to do financial aid? And because I cannot find a way for my beautiful Basset Hound to learn financial aid, we have bouncing heads to help students learn about it. These videos, none of them are over 2 minutes. So we have short, engaging videos, and I've even created Kahoot quizzes that go along with these videos. The videos are available in multiple languages, and you can use them within lesson plans or just on their own. Speaking of lesson plans, these are your financial aid advising day lesson plans. The financial aid advising day lesson plans, there's 5 of them. They walk through and have all of those resources ready to go for you so you don't have to create anything. And then finally, our Student Loan Advocacy Office. Our Student Loan Advocate is here to support consumers of student loans. That could be ourselves, it could be our students. They are wonderful. Not only do they have curriculum for students, they have support for those of us who are borrowers. So if you are a loan borrower who has questions, concerns, or even a complaint, this office is here to help you. They also have access to have they have the formal complaint portal that you can put in complaints. So they're amazing about supporting you and informing you of your rights and responsibilities as a student loan recipient. So even if you're watching this and you're like, I have questions about, maybe you have a PSLF question with the backlog or anything else, they're amazing. They help me with my stuff, even though I do this for a living. There are certain components of financial aid that are even more challenging, and they were wonderful walking me and other people I know through this process. Okay, with that, we are going to open up to questions in a second. I do have a post survey. If you could please do the post survey, I'm going to put it in the chat in a second. Thank you so much And then I'm just going to close out this recording a second. Thank you so much for joining us for Financial Aid Navigation. I'm going to answer questions now. If you're watching this recording, all of those questions will be in the Q&A document that's available to you within the Google Doc. Thank you so much for learning more about financial aid, and let us know if you have any questions. I'm going to stop the